Didn't know this.
Yeah.
Okay, there you go. We're live. We are live. I can't start till it's just 6 o'clock, so. Sure. No problem. Okay, call the meeting to order. Please, in your silent prayer today, offer prayers for our clerk's office who undergoing a bout of COVID. Hope and pray that they remain as healthy as possible as they endure this. And also for Tara Gundren's husband, who endure emergency appendectomy yesterday. So keep them in your prayers. Rise. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Do you have the notice? Okay, here it is. I have it. I'll read it. Okay, we will open a public hearing for the Board of Supervisors' final plan for county and municipal redistricting. Notice is hereby given that pursuant to Wisconsin statute 5910 sub 3B, a public hearing will be conducted by the Washington County Board of Supervisors at 6 p.m. on November 10th, 2021 in room 1019 of the Herbert J. Tenney's Government Center, 432 East Washington Street, West Bend, to provide comment on the Board of Supervisors' final plan for county and municipal redistricting. Copy of the final plan for the county and municipal districting can be viewed or obtained at the Washington County Clerk's Office or at www.washcowisco.gov. Immediately following the public hearing, the Board of Supervisors and county staff will evaluate input received at the public hearing together with such other and further relevant information and take action concerning the adoption of the Board of Supervisors' final plan and resolution for county and municipal redistricting at a meeting held at 6 p.m. on November 10th, 2021 in room 1019 of the Herbert J. Tenney's Government Center, 432 East Washington Street, West Bend. If you have any questions or require further information, recovery, please contact the Washington County Clerk's Office. All interest parties will be heard. Dated this 21st day of October, 2021. Are there any members of the public to speak to the redistricting plan? I don't have to do it 3 times. No, I just have to ask. Seeing none. The public hearing is closed. And I'll entertain a motion for 2021 ordinance 7 to amend 15-1 relating to supervisory districts. Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Marquardt. there any discussion? Got all the information we need, so we will vote on this. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Did I get everybody on correctly on the screen? Okay. You have that, Ashley?
Yes, we're good. Thank you, Don.
All right, motion passes. I'm gonna forego the consent agenda and move right into 2021 Resolution 64, the grant application for Neighborhood Investment Fund grant that needs to be done by midnight tonight in order to be able to get it. So that's gonna go first and give Julie some time to get it done and get it posted. So entertain a motion. Supervisor Smisek, Supervisor Schultheis. Is there any, do we need to have any discussion? We need an explanation or County Executive Showman? Let me get you on here. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This presentation was given to the Health and Human Services Committee earlier this month, I guess late last month. And there was a good discussion about the entirety of the project. I'll fast forward through all of that to current state and basically what we're asking of you. As you know, we have tried kind of a number of different ways to continue the tradition of funding Samaritan Campus by means other than property tax levy. That's been an ongoing thing well before my tenure here. Probably 15 years or more, the county has been in that situation. We're trying to keep it that way. We tried with the Cedar Campus collaboration to make that work. Obviously, that didn't work. What we're coming to you with today is another version of that, which would allow for driving the principal and interest cost of any new construction down to the point that the remaining balance would be able to be handled by Medicaid reimbursements, or I should just say patient reimbursements at Samaritan. In other words, allowing us to continue not putting property tax dollars into Samaritan Campus. If that is what we're able to achieve, if you kind of go back to the beginning of this discussion, it really is less, I think, of a concern or a dialogue about whether we should be in the business as long as Medicaid is paying for what Medicaid is supposed to be covering. And in this case, a federal grant through the state of Wisconsin. So what we're asking, the policy question today is very specific. It's asking you to authorize staff to go ahead and apply for a grant that would cover a big chunk of the ultimate cost of building a new facility. What's not written in there, but certainly is implied, is if you proceed with the grant application, you're effectively removing referendum as an option. And the reason I say that is the deadline for the grant application, let me rephrase that. The timeline for us finding out whether or not we got the grant application will not be until after the deadline for referendum resolution. In other words, you won't have enough time to put forward a resolution to go to referendum. So we're essentially taking that off the table. As you contemplate and discuss whether or not to apply for this grant and subsequently whether or not referendum really should be pulled from the table, I would say to you this, and we've spent a lot of time, myself, Chair McCreefall, Chairwoman Dice, in the case of the Health and Human Services Committee, and staff who's sitting here today, discussing the strategic approach to how to handle this discussion as a whole. 2 years ago, we started with talking about going to referendum. This is a focus on the people kind of an issue. 2 years later, the world has completely changed. And as was just talked about moments ago, there's all kinds of money coming from all kinds of places. Now, people in this room understand that much of that has strings attached, there's red tape, There's all kinds of caveats to all of that money. However, it makes going to the public and asking for more money quite difficult, if not impossible. That's not to imply that people can't ascertain the difference, but I think it's hard enough where we were at 2 years ago to articulate the three issues of staffing and an old building and failing Medicaid reimbursement. Now to do all of that and say, oh, we've got all this money, but it's not the right kind of money or it's not coming from the right place, I think makes it almost impossible. What does that all mean? It all means, for the purposes of this discussion, that we think at this moment in time, this grant would be the best way for us to continue to stay in this business, to allow for the federal Medicaid money to fund what it's supposed to fund, and to allow us to not get in the business from a property tax or sales tax or taxpayer perspective locally. If we are not to get the grant, however, and I don't think you can make a public policy decision without contemplating that, because it's very possible we don't get the grant. We know that these are all very competitive grants. If we do not get the grant, it puts us right back at the start of this discussion where we were at 2 years ago. And that is, should the county be in this business or should it not? And if the answer is we should be in the business, county government in one way, shape, or form, taxpayers in Washington County will be forced to consider subsidizing. Because of the timing, you will have to make that decision. We won't have the advantage of going to referendum to feel out where the people of Washington County are at. And for all the reasons I articulated a moment ago, I'm not sure that it's as easy as we thought it was 2 years ago, knowing it wasn't easy then. So as you contemplate and discuss whether or not to direct staff to finalize this grant, and Julie now has 5 hours and 50 minutes to start writing that grant and get it submitted.
It's written.
Oh, it's written. Oh, okay. At least hit send. While you're considering that, I would ask you to think about those ramifications in the back of your mind, knowing on this agenda, for the purposes of this discussion, I'm sure the county attorney and the parliamentarian will hold you to it, but knowing that by making this decision, there's other decisions that you're effectually making. So I think for the purposes of public policy discussion, all cards need to be on the table in a public session, your public dialogue. You should know staff is not trying to set it up so that you're making one choice, not realizing you're making another. We want you to know you've got all the cards in front of you. If you make the choice to go down the grant path, we're kind of all in on that. And if we lose on it, we're going to be back and we have to make a decision soon. The final component that I will inform you of, if you haven't been following along with the Health and Human Services Committee, at the last meeting, that committee authorized a significant spend, I'll just say roughly $2 million, because I'll get the exact number wrong, but roughly $2 million of incentive pay, for lack of a better term, and retention type pay to keep particularly nursing staffing viable. And everyone in the healthcare industry is facing those types of challenges. Everyone in most industries are facing those types of challenges, but specifically in the healthcare industry. And we've got the added brick in the wall of, we don't know what the future of the building's facility, holds. And so that became a necessity. The Health and Human Services Committee approved that expenditure. We're in the process now of executing on that approval. That's American Recovery Plan Act money. Whether it comes from our $26.2 million allocation or elsewhere is yet to be determined, but nonetheless, it's a significant investment in personnel that is not related to the budget. So there are many, many moving pieces. You need to understand all of those moving pieces as best you can, even to make a decision which doesn't appear like the whole decision, but it is a huge impact on the entirety of the decision. So again, today's discussion is asking you to approve applying for this grant with all of those underlying factors as well. Is there any that I missed? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Dice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As our county executive usually does, he's covered all the fine points of this issue. I have nothing to add to what he has specifically said, but I do think that we as a board need to take this step. It's reasonable to me. It's a way to satisfy the issue that we have with Samaritan. It may not satisfy all the staffing issues that are there or what will happen with Medicaid in the future, but at least it's moving us forward, which I think is very important. I personally want to take this opportunity to thank the staff, the county staff that was involved in this. As Josh said, we've been talking on this issue for over the last 2 years. And the time that's gone into this and how things have evolved over that period of time is remarkable in my way of thinking. I can remember walking out of one meeting totally disheartened, thinking we're never going to solve this. But somehow we always managed to do that. So my thanks, my great thanks to Julie, to Matt Furno, to our county exec and the other staff members that have been working on this. So I hope that this is a unanimous, yay, let's do this. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Markwart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, the report identifies that we anticipate between 1 million and 15 million to each applicant. Is that dependent on how many other entities are applying for this money, that it just gets divvied up according to the state's decision-making?
Yep, so there's $200 million available in this grant application. The amount that someone could apply for ranges from 1 million to 15 million, depending on how many applicants there are and how much they're requesting. And then the score that you get on your application will be dependent on how many they award.
Okay, thank you. So we want 12 million. If they only give us 3 or 4, that obviously throws a wrench in the, the ability of the facility to pay for itself for the rest of the money. So by doing this, we're hoping we get what we're asking for, but we're also then, as you say, committing to this process. So we may then, if we get 3 million, we have to kick in the rest going down this road, this chosen road. Or
Yes, and yes. So yeah,
okay,
yes, we can accept. Yes, we can refuse the grant. It's astute for you to note you're essentially committing yourself to a project short of completely refusing the grant. And that's what I was trying to say by saying we're laying all our cards on the table. Let's say, we'll use your example, let's say we get $3 million. And that means that county taxpayers have to subsidize, I'll just say $300,000 a year. That's very possible. That debt borrowing, debt obligation has to cover the rest. And Samaritan's operating revenue can only cover so much. We have the means to be able to do that. The budget you're going to contemplate in a few minutes cuts the levy by $1 million over the biennium, which means we have some ability to claw back, is the term, some of that $1 million in 2024, 25, so on and so forth. We also have other debt that's coming off the levy. This has really never been a, do we have the money or don't we have the money issue? It's been more of a almost ideological, philosophical, are we in this business or not? Because as Supervisor Dice was alluding to, in my humble opinion, this is something that Medicaid should be funding fully. And now we find ourselves in a position where they're not funding it fully. As a matter of fact, they're barely half funding it. And it's both Medicaid and the state of Wisconsin, mind you. And then the local taxpayer is expected to step in and solve the difference. Well, this isn't a Washington County issue. This is a federal issue. Why are we asking local taxpayers to solve what the state and the feds can't figure out? That, to me, that's a problem. So long story short, yes, you are putting yourself in a position where you're ostensibly committing to a project by voting for this grant. For more reasons than just voting for the grant. This is going to send a signal to the whole community that this is happening, and all the staff, by the way, and the residents. And you have plenty of means and tools to actually get the project done. It'll circle all the way back, whether it's a small portion of the grant or whether you get no grant at all. It's all going to circle back to, should we be in this business or shouldn't we?
Thank you.
Thank you. Some of my questions have already been asked, but could, Josh, could you go over what some of the strings that might be attached to this grant? Because there's always strings. And then I have a follow-up question after that.
So the big string, I believe that will be attached is Davis-Bacon or the federal prevailing wage rules, which will likely drive the cost of the project up. So what that mean, if you remember years ago, does everybody know what prevailing wage is? Okay, so I won't dive into that. That's the biggest, that's probably the biggest. There certainly will be other hoops that we have to jump through, and reporting requirements that we will have that otherwise we wouldn't have if we were just borrowing by ourselves and funding it alone. But Davis-Bacon's probably the biggest one.
Okay, I was thinking more, would there be any like design requirements of like this new building that we would do differently because of where the money comes from?
Yeah. Essentially, the way that this grant is written is that your project has to be shovel ready. And you have to be able to begin some level of work in 2022, and it must be complete by December 31st of 2024. So, and then there's like reporting requirements, obviously. So that's the gist of what their requirements for the grant are. Some of the other things that come along with it, as the county executive alluded to, will be those things. But as far as their requirements for the grant, those are what they are.
Okay. The other question is in the, it's not in the county board resolution, but in the committee packet, in the fiscal effect notes, it says that by approving this, this resolution designates the approval of Washington County to bond the remainder of the project up to 18 million. So obviously we'll still have a debate at a future meeting for the bonding of it. So we're not committing to the bonding at this time by applying for the grant still, correct?
Yes, it's technically correct.
Technically, yes, I know, but I know what the
Practically,
message is.
it's not.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. You're right.
Okay.
And I just want to clarify one other thing from your previous question, because our facility is largely funded by Center for Medicaid Services. There's all kinds of regulations already, which is largely why there won't be a whole lot that's new, except for probably following Davis-Bacon and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like many of my co-supervisors here, since we started this conversation several years ago, I've been speaking to my constituents within my district and outside the district, getting the feel on what our county residents want for Samaritan. I had no one say we should get out of the business. And talked about we may have to support this with levy funds. And they says, if that's what we have to do, we have to do. So there is support in the community to continue with Samaritan. I support, this is great that there's an option, whether we get it or not. But I do feel we need to continue to move forward with getting a replacement for our building for Samaritan and continue the good care that we are giving our residents in the county. Thank you.
Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Supervisor Dice. I would hope that this is a unanimous vote. I fully understand what Supervisor Bishop just brought up because like you, Supervisor, I have also heard from a number of different constituents as regards to this. I have heard some people, however, that said that this is, it's not something that the taxpayer should be, fortunately for them at least, they don't financially have to worry about it. But for those of us, many of us who, it is a concern. It truly is a concern. I've brought this up in the past, and this is something that I hope somehow legally, Attorney Stern, maybe you can shed some light on this or at least help me, is to address the fact that this is Washington County spending the money. We have a county right below us who kicked grandma to the curb years ago, and that's Waukesha County, when they abandoned their nursing home and just let it fly. And my concern is the fact that this is allowed to happen. So you have people who would then just use our facility through whatever means they can to put people in from other counties. So then the taxpayers of Washington County end up footing the bill for those counties who choose not to participate in taking care of their elderly who do not have other means. And that is the scary part for me. And I don't know, Josh, you and I have talked about this before. I know, Don Creefall, you and I have talked about this before. It doesn't mean I don't want to move forward, but it means I think we have to go into this with eyes wide open. I mean, if we build it, they will come, basically, to quote a well-used phrase. And that's a scary thing to me, thinking that the taxpayers of Washington County end up I think inordinately, serving an underserved community well outside of Washington County. Josh is right in the fact that this is a national problem. Absolutely. If you can shrink it down, it's at least a state problem. And to have an individual county going out there and sticking out its proverbial neck and saying, we are going to do the right thing, that's fine. But you got to realize there's a cost to that. I do agree that we should move forward with this, and I'm going to vote for it. But please keep that in mind, at least right now, Attorney Stratton. To my knowledge, there's no way of stopping somebody from Fond du Lac County, from Ozaukee County, from Waukesha County, from Dodge County to come to our facility, given, 30, 60, 90 days of putting grandma in an apartment or, whatever, and then putting her in our home, and suddenly we've got the bill. That's a scary thing. And we have to understand that can and will happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Schulteis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just going to pivot back to the grant
Hey.
a little bit, considering it's already written. I'm just curious about the scoring and the criteria for the scoring. Does that help us get closer to the maximum amount based on the scoring and the criteria? Have we done this before?
So each category, there's not very many. I've written a lot of grants, and this is the oddest one I've written because there's only 7 questions, and one of them is the budget. And you can't write, they're not asking for a lot of information. So each category has a different score, anywhere from 10 points per category to 30 points per category. My, guess based on experience is that, they'll provide a score for each category, and then they'll rank the applications based on score. And then, they'll have to do some shuffling based on how much money each, project is asking for. The funding for, or one of the categories that this grant specifically is asking about that has some points attached to it is whether or not the population that you're trying to impact has been significantly impacted by COVID-19, or if you're in a qualified census tract. So we do not have any qualified census tracts in Washington County. However, as many of you know, there's been nobody harder hit from COVID-19 than nursing homes. And so, we for sure will likely get some high points in that category. The other questions that they're asking is the need of the project and how you're going to meet that need, and whether it's a regional and national need. And so, significant need across the country for figuring out nursing home care. It just depends on if, I was able to write it well enough in 300 words. So.
Wow, thank you very much.
Thank you. Supervisor Schleif.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank all my fellow supervisors for very salient comments, very thought provoking. I go to Marcy though. I've been asking questions too of my constituents ever since we started talking about a referendum. And in Germantown, we're, I guess, blessed to have several care facilities. And I haven't talked to anybody in Germantown yet that knows about the Samaritan. So that's kind of the other side of the coin. I agree we should go for the grant, but I'm no way committing to staying in the business if it comes to hard questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Krieger Gundrum.
I just wanted to remind everybody that the task force said that we had a moral obligation to the needy in our county. And I stand by that, what we said a long time ago. And I did want to ask a question about people coming in from other counties. My understanding from the task force was that if somebody from another county comes into the Samaritan, we get to double dip on the revenue, that we collect a room charge, and we get to collect from Medicare. Did I misunderstand that?
That's not entirely accurate. However, we rarely at this point, based on our admissions policy, will accept somebody from out of county. It's a tenuous balance between managing the number of beds that we are giving to Medicaid or family care, and then either private pay or some other type of payment. Because, as we know, Medicaid pays significantly less. So to make the budget work, you do have to have a mix of payer sources. And so there could be, if we had an open bed and no other person, somebody come from out of county, but it is very unlikely and rarely happens because there's such a need for nursing home beds. And so our admissions policy is that we would not take somebody from out of county unless we had nobody else and there was an open bed, and specifically for Medicaid and family care. And I certainly understand the thought process is that's your policy, but I'm sure things can get through it that, nothing's perfect, but as of what happens right now, that is the admissions policy. But to answer your question specifically, there isn't additional funding that you get for other residents from other counties.
So we don't collect anything from the county that brings them in. All we get is the Medicare reimbursement.
That's correct.
Supervisor Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Couple of thoughts on this. First of all, for Supervisor Bishop's comments, I think were excellent. Politically speaking, it's very simple. It's very easy. We're protecting our most vulnerable citizens. And that's what we really want to do. So from a political standpoint, when you can post on Facebook, I saved old folks, that's awesome. And everybody's going to love you. But practically speaking, Mr. Mahalik's comments are very pointed too. I think they're extremely valuable here. We don't want to become a magnate county here, where our taxpayers are basically supplementing other counties. We see that with our library as an example. So I think that's something we want to be very concerned with. And also to Josh's point of view, which is also very pointed, this isn't a county problem. We're actually not under any orders to do this. I mean, we do this because we love our fellow citizens and we want to protect our people, our most vulnerable people especially, but we're not under any obligation through the state or through the federal government to do this at all. So I'm only stating all of this that you all think about these things equally. I mean, you can take political advantage and just go, yes, I'm saving old folks, but you're also spending a lot of money for the taxpayer. And you're also not pushing back on the federal government, who really needs to be pushed back on. So that's something to consider when you're considering all this. Now, I'm definitely going to go for this grant. Don't misunderstand what I'm doing here. But I ask you for the future to think about these things, because it might be a time when you may have to make that Tim Mahalik decision or that Josh Showman decision rather than that Marcy Bishop decision. And you might want to be prepared to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Galt.
Thank you, Chair. Executive Showman, could you repeat your comment about Medicaid, basically Medicaid reimbursement fees, whatever we call it, basically would be paying for the bonds, the principal and interest?
There's a specific reimbursement rate that's allocated per bed, $75,900 per bed right now, which is very, very low. There's discussion at the state level about changing that. Remember, Medicaid flows through the state and then the state administers it. So that is would be a contemplated change. If we get the grant to the extent we've applied for, the 75.9 covers the difference, if you will, what needs to be borrowed. If we don't get the grant, something needs to supplement the difference. So that's really what it boils down to.
And so if we don't get the grant, that difference you're saying, we're prepared to absorb that with the future budget, operating budget, or have to increase levy? One or the other?
Yeah, those are essentially the same thing, but, or I should say, and you have other options as well. So this is the kind of downward circular debate you get into and what other counties are doing. But mind you, there are other counties leaving this business for exactly this reason. Many places, many counties have decided to get more and more into competing with the private sector. Because let's just be very candid, by the Health and Human Services Committee authorizing that incentive pay or retention pay or whatever you want to call it, we're competing directly with every hospital, every healthcare, public, private, nonprofit, doesn't matter. So what some places are doing to offset rather than using tax levy is they're building things like we did, RCACs, independent living, more CBRFs, which is all direct competition to Cedar Campus, the Pavilion, name the facility. So you have options. That's why I said from the beginning, this has really never been a money issue. It's more of every time you take one of those steps, you're directly competing. And the other thing to keep in mind is county nursing homes, maybe I should say government nursing homes probably covers more, already get a subsidy on top of Medicaid. What's the acronym? SP it's called. It's basically bed tax for everybody else. All the private pay a bed tax that goes into a pot, and then it's distributed back to the government nursing homes to supplement the difference. Supplemental pay, SP. So when I say you have lots of options, that's what I mean. You have lots of options. Could it be levy? Yes. Could it be sales tax? Yes. Could it be independent living? Yes. All of those have consequences, and they all keep ratcheting up how much are you going to compete with the private sector.
Okay, thank you for that. I guess a few other comments that a few other supervisors have mentioned. The cost of continuing to run business in the future isn't going to get cheaper. It's only going to get more expensive. The $2 million you just talked about, if we didn't have that pot of slush fund, we'd be paying for that presumably out of our fund balance, right?
Yes, correct.
So what happens in 3 years when we need more of that? Because, the labor pool for nursing and CNAs is not growing, it's shrinking with retirement and people getting out. So if we're not considering what those future impacts are going to be. How can we run a sustainable business if we're stealing a labor pool from one county or another, or private and public? You know, those are real decisions we need to think about. How do you run a business when you can't find workers? So that's something that has been on my mind. So yes, it's great to be able to care for our citizens, but can we adequately do it? And if we can't say that affirmatively, do we leave that with other organizations that are currently doing that?
Yes, you thank you, Chairman. It's been a very interesting discussion around the room here tonight. And I think valid points made across the board everywhere. The one thing that strikes me, and perhaps we're getting away a little bit from the discussion point itself. Yeah, we need to be concerned about people from other counties perhaps taking advantage of the generosity and the loving care that people of Washington County want to provide. But I get more concerned about the relative or the friend or the neighbor down the street who needs this assistance. And we say, well, we can't help you. You got to go to Fond du Lac, you got to go to Dodge County, you got to go somewhere else, and your family is going to have to go there to visit you. To me, that's a scarier prospect. Thank you, sir.
Supervisor Conrad.
Oh, thank you. Speaking as a nurse and a lifelong resident of Washington County and someone who did go around to when I campaigned door to door, which you've heard multiple times. First, this is not a political issue. This is a moral obligation, as Supervisor Krieger Gundrum stated, and that was identified too by our volunteer community group, who essentially made the decision for us if we were going to move forward or not and stay in this business. And we have to care for our citizens across the lifespan. We put money into, fire, EMS, our school systems, everything else. We need to also invest in our elderly population and care for our citizens across the lifespan. Regarding Build It and They Will Come, I was serving in a private sector hospital in Waukesha County when Waukesha got out of the business of providing long-term care services. And what happened to the hospital systems is those individuals waiting to get in somewhere would stay in that expensive ICU bed or in that expensive acute care inpatient hospital bed, and thus, cost the taxpayers also that way, and was more, also detrimental to the family. And we have had open beds. And we're talking about moving forward, decreasing our beds. So if it was an issue, it would have been an issue.
Thank you. Supervisor Sorcy.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've talked to, not a lot, but some people in Germantown. And the first thing out of their mouth was how much it's going to cost us. But again, I can understand it, but at the Human Services meeting, I brought up a solution, a situation. Josh just going, I'm going to kill him. No. I had brought up the situation where there are tons of foundations out there, okay? Get on foundations.com and get them, talk to a few of those and have them subsidize what we need, and then do the other thing that we need to do. I mentioned it. I don't have any hard feelings, but I'm just saying, I thought that would be a great idea to help us in getting us in trouble with the other stuff. But that was my idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion, We'll vote on this again. It's not going to be electronic. Um, hmm? What? Oh, you want to? Yeah, okay. One thing before we get to the vote.
There is a recommended change to the fiscal note. This doesn't materially change the resolution at all, but in speaking with Director Driscoll, she indicated that the fiscal note as it currently appears in the resolution that's before you may be at odds with a part of the application that she's submitting and could cause confusion. So her and I had discussed this, talked to Margie in Finance, and have some different language that we'd like to insert administratively if there's no strong objection to that, to this resolution. And it would read as follows. The new fiscal note would say, there are no known costs to apply for the grant and no matching requirements if the county is awarded funds. If awarded, grant amounts would be applied to the Samaritan Health Center replacement project. Additionally, if approved, the resolution affirms the county's desire to proceed with a debt issue. So that would be the language that would be substituted as a fiscal note that then Julie could take with her as she completes her application.
Okay, are there any objections to that? Seeing none, let's vote on this. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
We got who's the nay? Oh, it's aye? Okay. All right, motion passes unanimously. Okay, we'll move on. And thanks, Julie. Get that. Yeah. Consent agenda, motion to approve. Supervisor Mary, Supervisor Schleif. Any discussion, changes?
Hey, Don.
What? Do we have any?
Don?
Supervisor Bossert?
Yeah, just a quick heads up to everybody. The jail tour is going to be delayed again. There apparently has been a small outbreak of COVID, so we're going to delay it to the December meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other changes? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Consideration upon a request reading of resolutions, ordinances, 2021 Resolution 54, 2022, 2023 budget appropriation. This is a 2/3 vote. Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Sorcy. County Executive Showman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, County Board Supervisors, for the opportunity to present this budget to you. This has obviously gone through each one of your committees in your various and respective consideration for each department and through the Executive Committee now twice. So I thank you for your contemplation. A number of things are happening in this budget that I'm very proud of. And the first is we're balancing a budget with a reduction of $1 million in the property tax levy over the biennium. I couldn't be more proud of that. Putting our property taxpayers first. This is their money, not our money. And unlike so many other units of government, we're acting that way. As I said in an earlier meeting, I'll let our actions in this budget speak louder than any words can. And I think that right there says it all. So I'm very excited to announce that today and ask for your support in that regard. I'll also note for the record here that by the end of this biennium in 2023, we're projecting that our property tax rate will drop to $1.93. That, of course, is an estimate. We have to wait for equalized value numbers to come in 2023. But anything below $2 a thousand, we believe this will be the lowest tax rate since the 1800s. So we're very excited for that as well. At the same time, as I explained to the Executive Committee, while property taxpayers are always first on our mind, we are also always trying to balance the capital needs of the county and the human resources. And so there's some really significant investments in both of those. First, in our radio system, and of course, you'll be contemplating this in just a moment. But our radio system will have a significant upgrade. That is part of this budget in the form of principal and interest payments on a debt acquirement that you'll be considering in just a few minutes. Those dollars, again, for the second time in a row, are going to come from our existing operating dollars. We're not using a new debt levy, which means we're not increasing taxes to pay for that. That's a significant accomplishment. Most people aren't wonky enough in local government tax revenue to understand how big of a deal that is. But I can tell you, no one else is doing what you're doing. This doesn't exist anywhere else. Washington County is leading the way, hands down. And so we're very excited for that. What this represents in reality between those two things, you notice they're approximately $1 million each. They essentially can be tied back to the completion of the revolving loan fund double down that you authorized probably 6 or 7 years ago now. So all of the strategic financial planning that this board and previous boards have done have put you in a position, unlike probably any other governmental unit, maybe in America, where you can make decisions to live within your means and still do massive projects like a $13+ million radio system upgrade without increasing taxes, and in fact, decreasing taxes. A couple of other highlights in regard to the human resources component, because that is that third leg of the stool that we spend so much time on. There is a new department that is being formed, a community development department. I hope you had an opportunity to read up on that. It is tied directly to the Our Great Community Initiative and the next generation housing effort. That department will be under what has historically been the Planning and Parks Department. Jamie Ludovic is heading up that area, and I am excited for that as well. There's a number of new positions in that department. They are funded, to be 100% transparent, they are funded in this biennium with grant dollars, American Recovery Plan Act dollars. There is a plan that has been presented to the Land Use and Planning Committee for that to wean off of those grant dollars over the course of the following biennium, so the next 4 years, and eventually that'll be all absorbed by taxpayers. But it will happen in such a way that you won't see a major difference in tax rate or tax levy over that time because it's spread out over time. There are a number of other positions throughout all of the other departments as well. I won't point to all of them as that would take some time. This is the most significant investment throughout the entirety of the county budget. In my tenure here in Washington County, we are making significant investments directly in human resources. And that is a reflection of our service delivery. We deliver services to human beings, and it takes human beings to do that service delivery. So there are a number of positions that I'm excited that we're implementing this year. Final couple of things that I want to touch on. Our Transportation 2050 plan continues to be funded. What you should note as you go through the notes of the entirety of this budget is that we are not planning on borrowing a second time to fund the 2050 transportation plan. What that means is the next biennium, your 6-year planning is going to work again. You're going to have another significant inflow of dollars that had been going to principal and interest for the roads that will now be available to utilize for other purposes in the operating fund and or return to taxpayers. That is another humongous accomplishment. In addition to that, we have a number of our projects fully funded still through 2050 without raising taxes. And we expect millions of dollars in the latest infrastructure bill that was passed, which certainly we will be applying for some of those dollars as well. So that is the gist of the presentation on the budget. Of course, there's a lot more details that are in there. I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. I want to take this opportunity to thank my cabinet for their work on this budget, to thank the department heads who really are the ones that sharpened their pencils and got this work completed. And specifically Aaron Dahl and Margie Hammers. If you know anything about me, I'll walk in at any one moment and come up with about 15 different ideas for how to do crazy things that no one else has ever done. And they still have hair on their heads, so that in and of itself is a miracle. But they do a fantastic job of going through all of those different ideas and identifying which ones will work and which ones won't. And it helps to make the magic work, why you have a tax rate that's lower than it was in 1900. So kudos to them for making the dream work. And I really appreciate all the work of them and the entirety of our team. I'm very proud of this budget and I ask for your unanimous support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Any comments? Hearing none, we'll vote on this. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Everybody good on the motion passes unanimously. 2021 Resolution 55, authorization to create a property tax relief fund. This will also be a 2/3 vote. Oh, sorry, motion to accept. Supervisor Gallows, Supervisor Sorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully you have had an opportunity to read through what we're trying to accomplish here. I want to point out something critically important about what you're about to approve. Not just the resolution, but the subsequent ordinance. So the resolution itself, the minute you create this property tax relief fund, it is going to be full. Meaning we're going to be requiring ourselves to either find projects or reduce taxes, which of course you just did. So that's great news. And when you pass the ordinance, you're putting a requirement upon yourself, a 2/3 vote, to make any changes to this, which is an onerous task. For those of you who've been here a while, you know 2/3 votes can be a giant pain in the tail. We've had several votes that lost by 1 vote because we require 2/3 votes, which aren't statutorily required. But we're literally putting a requirement on ourselves to give people their money back. Again, no one's doing stuff like this. So I just want to make sure that you understand, both with the resolution and the ordinance, it is certainly an onerous requirement you're putting on yourself. I felt like, and this was a recommendation from County Attorney Stern, that we put it in ordinance form, so it is county law. So if you have any questions about the procedure, again, Margie Hammers and Aaron Dahl actually wrote out the policy, helped to get the resolution drafted through County Attorney Stern's office, but they can answer specific details to the numbers and the data. But it is a significant legislative effort on your part if you choose to support it, and I ask that you would.
Thank you. Supervisor Krebs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, you alluded to that. You said it's going to be immediately full. So I'm assuming that means our general fund is that healthy that we're going to commit $5 million to property tax relief right away.
That is correct, yes. And that when I said that you'll need to make decisions relatively quickly about what to do about that. Projects like the one you're going to consider in just a little bit with the sheriff's radio project or the conservation easement and the associated endowment are the types of things that you'll be contemplating. Does it go directly to taxpayer reduction? Does it go indirectly through offsetting debt or creating an endowment? Those are the types of decisions you'll be asked to make.
So the offsetting of debt, is that for existing debt or is this for future projects where we would, instead of incurring the debt initially, or is it both?
It could be either. It's situational dependent, but it could help, for example, with a down payment on the debt. So the principal and interest payments aren't as much, for example, or potentially you have something that you would do for $4 or $5 million and you decide to pay cash rather than debt, which in most places would mean you're increasing taxes.
So this is similar to having the money sitting in the general fund where we just use it unilaterally as we see fit. Only if we don't use it within a 2-year window, the next budget cycle, does the whole account get drained at that point and all 5 million goes straight towards the next 2-year budget? Or walk me through how,
Sure.
what is the next 2, 4, 6 years, multiple budget cycles? How does this ebb and flow through?
Great question. And if I go astray, either of staff members can help me, but the intent is that if you get to the end of that cycle and you're still over the 5 million, you're requiring yourself to reduce property taxes, which by the way means that's a one-time use of money. It's not ongoing. So the following year, if you can't make that up, you're going to have to increase taxes back to where they were, but you're essentially giving people one-time relief. Does that make sense?
So and that one-time relief is required only above 5 million?
Above
of
5
the
million.
fund balance? So we could theoretically have 5 million sitting in there
Yes.
for a long time if we choose not to use that tool in the toolbox.
Exactly. And the reason that that it's set up exactly that way is practically speaking, if you go back to 2010, it's probably the best year to point to. When property values are dropping like crazy, tax rates start to skyrocket, because if you remember the formula, the old 3rd grade math formula, tax levy divided by property value equals tax rate. Well, when the denominator starts to go down fast, you can't reduce taxes fast enough to get the tax rate to drop or stay the same. And so what this will allow you to do in even a horrible economy is to plug that tax levy with one-time money for a period of time so that taxes aren't skyrocketing on people right at the moment they can't afford it the least. Does that make sense?
Yes, yeah.
So, and then if you go over 5 million, you can't, we're saying to ourselves, 2/3 vote, you can't go over 5 million. This is their money, give it back.
At 5 million, we've taxed too much and we're returning it immediately.
Right. And
Okay.
remember, the 5 million is above and beyond our existing policy. So and that policy is intended to be a savings account, so you can pay cash at any one time for anything. This is above and beyond that. And then if you go past that, that's when we're saying you got to start giving it back immediately.
Okay, last question would be what will the policy be, or does this go back to the 2/3 vote? How do we decide when to tap this policy for these one-time debt payments or in lieu of debt projects?
So the theory is that the budget process will force the discussion. So as supervisors, it'll be incumbent upon you and whoever the county executive is to basically look at the audit and see where did we end with those fund balances. And if it's over that 5 million, essentially somebody somewhere should be saying, we have a requirement by county law that we have to reduce property taxes. So unless somebody's sleeping at the wheel, county law should dictate that automatically happens.
I'm talking for, like, say if it's less than a 5 million, if the fund is not completely funded, or if we're having these one-time expenses pop up, is this like going to be a part of the process on every project, part of the checklist of is this eligible for, or should we be considering this for this project, whether it's the Samaritan Center, the sheriff's, the radio tower, some new highway in the middle of a farm field, whatever it is. Sorry, I couldn't
Too
think of
soon.
a different
Too
road
soon.
name. Is this going to be considered every time there's a major project, whatever the department is?
It could be.
Okay.
It could be. I wouldn't say it will be, but it could be.
It's going to be on your mind at least,
Yeah,
or the
certainly.
staff's mind.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Supervisor Gallowitz.
Thank you, Chair. Executive Showman, so in the Property Tax Relief Fund policy, I think it's Section 5, use of funds. So just a question regarding your comment about one-time funds. I get it, right? So if we decided to pay part of the radio tower, or sorry, the emergency system, we could take money out of that. But what about reoccurring expenses? So debt payment, principal and interest, that could come out of that as well?
Yes, in theory, and in particular, if we end a biennium at 6 million instead of 5 million, for an example, and we decide we're gonna cut property tax levy by $1 million because we passed a law saying we have to. Basically what you're doing, to put it in the simplest terms, is you're saying, I make $40,000 a year, I'm gonna spend $41,000 a year, and next year I know I'm not gonna have that extra thousand. I gotta come up with it somewhere next year. That's essentially what we'll be doing. So I use the example of 2010 because it's very, very real. When you supplement that one time, you're tapping into your savings account. You can only do that for so long. Essentially what I'm trying to create is we in the middle of a recession in particular, we're buying ourselves time to make strategic discussions because unfortunately, government processes take so stinking long that it could be 2 years before a decision we make now, stinking long. It could be 2 years before a decision we make today actually has implications. For example, health insurance, we make a health insurance adjustment, it could be 2 years before we see any savings. So this is intended to kind of give you enough of a sugar high to get you to where you need to be. Does that answer your question?
It did. So it prompts another question. So also in the number 4, maximum fund balance talks about the combination of general fund and the property tax should not exceed 20% of budgeted operating expenditures. So when coming up with that and the current policy of what, 11 to 16% for the general fund, is that 11, 16% appropriate? You know, if we've amassed a general fund, as our esteemed Mr. Mahalik a few meetings ago said, it's taxpayers' dollars that we collected too much than we could or should have. So my question is, in this decision, is that 11, 16 adequate, or could that go down to say 8 to 12, for example?
That's a great question. If you read, I believe this is in the packet, correct me if I go astray, but if you read the analysis on our debt obligations, one of the big reasons we have 11 to 16% is to maintain a AAA bond rating. Having that savings account drops our interest rates, increases our bond rating, however you want to look at it. So 11 to 16% is a sweet spot. Audit recommended. We could certainly go lower, no doubt about it. But basically it makes us cash rich enough where from a bondholder perspective, if something happened, we have the cash to pay our debts.
Right. So defensively to an astute taxpayer that says, hey, wait a minute, it was so large, it's for a reason. It actually protects you from better rates in the future because we have a better bond rating.
Yes, and huge fluctuations in tax rates.
Thank you.
And I'll just note, before Margie was here, we did not have even that policy. So both of these are under her leadership as finance director.
Supervisor Markwart.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to commend you for coming up with this, both the finance department and Josh. It reminds me of a law change that I worked on when I served on the school board. You are correct in saying that government does not move quickly, and it also does not incentivize good decision-making. So this is a way to make government operate more like all of us do in our household incomes. And, you know, budget and buffer for variations in both income and spending. And like, as I said, in my school board service, we found a way to create a savings account type fund as well in order to consider money spent, even though they technically weren't, they were just reallocated. And I urge people to support this innovative solution. Thanks.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'm gonna point out we have a slight typo, page 2, line 5. It should be further resolved that the property tax relief fund is not a tax stabilization fund as defined under Wisconsin statute 59 to 60. So that's a friendly amendment, just a typo. If everyone's okay with that, we'll move forward with the vote. Any objections? Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We move right away into ordinance 8, amend section 4913 related to property tax relief fund. Entertain a motion to Supervisor Dice, Supervisor Markwart. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? Oh, I'm sorry. Supervisor Galt.
Sorry, in the language, it talks about property assessed clean energy. Can you define that?
Oh, that's the PACE financing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's monies that are spent, state money and federal money that goes to upgrading projects to make them more efficient, energy efficient. So I'm on the PACE Commission. We look at different projects. Some of them are existing, some of them are new, but just to make them more energy efficient. It's a loan. And it's funding back through that's, but it's not.
We're not
doesn't-
hamstringing
it's
ourselves.
It's not county taxpayer fund.
Okay. Thank you.
So. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, sorry, did you want to speak to that? Okay, you were flashing.
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Okay. Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 2021 Resolution 56, authorization to transfer designated CIP funds from the jail expansion project to the radio system project. There's also a 2/3 vote. Motion by Supervisor Markwart, second by Supervisor Schleif. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Resolution 2021, Resolution 57, resolution awarding the sale of 13 million general obligation communication project bonds, series 2021. Motion, Supervisor Schulteis, Supervisor Kelly. We have a presentation. Okay. Yeah, let me turn you on. Sorry.
Am I good?
You're good.
So this is the first time that I'm aware of that our county has actually put a debt issue out for a competitive bid. It's good practice to do so, especially with how infrequently we issue debt and how highly we are rated by Moody's, AAA, the highest we can be. So because this is the first time we've done that, our financial advisor, Brian Della, is here from PMA, just to kind of give us a brief overview of the results of that bid process, so that you guys can just kind of understand the process and the results before we do the final award resolution tonight.
Thank you, Margie. Good. Okay, it is. All right, thank you. Well, it's good to be before you tonight. We got a little short presentation that we just kind of finalized this afternoon after the results of sale were taken this morning. So,
Oh, sorry, I missed it.
oops. Well, regarding the county's Moody's rating, as was mentioned, the county was reaffirmed as AAA. That is the highest rating you can receive, as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner. In the highlighted, the AAA is the highest you can get. I excerpted a couple items from the Moody's report, and the county benefits from a large affluent tax base, a history of stable financial operations and healthy reserves, and the county's debt burden remains low. One other thing that Moody's observed was that we let them know that the county is considering, or the possibility exists, of issuing debt for a new nursing home. And we talked about the price tag associated with that. And even with that price tag, that they would, which could raise your debt burden, Moody's wrote that could be, the debt burden could be raised significantly, though it still likely remain manageable. And obviously, there's nothing that can lead to an upgrade in your rating, but some downgrading factors could be a deterioration of your reserves, and liquidity. That's your fund balance and your cash balance, and excessive debt, and some, if there was an ongoing and significant levy strain from your enterprise fund, obviously Samaritan. So that's how Moody's looks at you, and so they're very very happy. I shouldn't say they're happy, but they couldn't assign a higher rating. So on October 13th, that's when the county authorized the issuance of $13 million for the communications bond. We passed two resolutions. One was an initial authorizing resolution, and one was a set sail resolution. So with those authorizations, we went forth and put an offering document out for the market to bid on. And at 10 a.m., we opened the bids on the $13 million communication bond issue. There were 4 bids that were received, and the winning bid had an average interest rate of 1.53%. So that means that 1.53% for 15-year bonds was the rate. So, when you consider where inflation is right now, being able to lock in 15-year, a 15-year borrowing at 1.53% seems pretty spectacular. The final award resolution was just the one in your packet was a draft, a form of, because we didn't know the winner, and the one that just came over this afternoon, that's got all the details of the sale, and the award is to Piper Sandler with the best bid. So got a couple more slides there. That's a little bit of bond math, a little wonky, but sometimes these things are hard to explain in words. So we put it on paper so everyone can refer to this if they so choose. So when you're pricing municipal bonds, the rate and the yield can have don't need to be the same. And sometimes the yield's higher than the rate, sometimes it's lower. But when it's higher, what that means is that the investor is going to pay you a little bit of extra money up front to get a little bit more interest down the road. And what this on slide 4, what this shows is the math behind where that, how did an original issue premium come into play here. So this is just the 15 different maturities. You multiply it by the price, which is determined by the coupons and the yields that the investor receives. And you can see that the underwriter, after they took their commission, is going to pay the county an extra $248,000 up front. And that's just based on the coupons and the yields. Now we'll look at this in a second, but that $248,000 will come in handy when we look at the following page, which is the debt service. So the final structure of this debt issue was fine-tuned this morning. And because state statute requires that $248,000, it must be treated as capitalized interest. So it's not, you can't use that money for the project fund. So when people go, when you vote on having a certain amount of debt for projects, they don't want people to be able to use this premium. They suggest on a new money project like this premium has to be treated as capitalized interest. So in other words, that has to go into the debt service fund, and that gets applied towards your interest payments. So what we did is we restructured the principal payments so that after we apply the $248,000 worth of capitalized interest towards your first year and a half worth of payments, your net debt service is an even $966,000 on average over the next 20 years, or I'm sorry, over the next 15 years. So that's, I'm sure you received some sort of estimates from Margie, earlier on, we were thinking, this was going to be over $1 million and the payments every year, but now it's, it's 966,000. So, a rate of 1.53 and, 4 really strong bids and a structure that I think is exactly the way you like it. I think it's a really great day to go to market. Plus the markets has been really rallying, which means rates of, if you can, even though everyone keeps talking about inflation, rates have really come down since the start of the month of November, and even after the Federal Reserve meeting last week. So it's surprising times in a way, but I'm glad we're able to take advantage of it for our clients that are borrowing.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You are correct. That was really wonky toward the end. But I want to clip coupons with you. I just want you to know that. That was incredible. Thank you.
Well, that is that's really what I don't know if that's an inside joke, but clipping coupons is about bonds. It's really that really was how you used to clip coupons, because they were really paper coupons of the bonds 100 years ago or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any further questions? Anybody online have any questions? I can't see you right now.
No.
Okay, hearing none, we can vote on this. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. (2021) Resolution 58, authorize a well, why don't we take a 5-minute break? Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm raring to go get it done, get her done, but I see everybody squirming in their seats. Point of order. Hey, Jeff. Concert? You call him. Yeah.
I heard my name. What's up?
Best to just call. You want to talk to him about? Oh, it's canceled already. This November meeting's canceled. I just got the email. So check your email. Yeah, so it said the November meeting of public safety was canceled. I just got it today. So yeah, it helps you out. You don't have to be there. Hey, Carol, I got a number of resolutions you have to sign. If you got to go hit the restroom, feel free. Let me find here. You have to sign. This one here. right there, need you. And right here, and right here, and right here, and right here. So, and this one's for Jeff. Yeah, there you go. When Jeff comes back, I'll give him. Chris, Dice, I need your John Henry. You gotta sign something here. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. Yeah, gotta fill in, gotta help them out.
I have a favor. This snowmobile thing that's coming up. Can I be the?
Sure.
Okay, because that
Yeah.
yeah, if I remember, but that was my constituent, I think, that raised that question that started that damn ball.
Okay.
So I just thought it was, you know.
Okay, that'd be good, sure. No probleme. Yeah. Oh, yeah, we had it first. I think it was Kelling and Schleif, I think. I don't know. I don't remember who it was. Yeah. Yeah, we did. We did. I know Ashley would get after me if I didn't, so. Yeah.
Which one are you asking about,
I'll
Don?
ask her to double check. Are you better now?
Yeah.
Mr. Peanut Butter. Anytime you want to talk over the big press. See that? So I was gonna ask you. Everybody, please be seated. Okay. Well, we were waiting for Supervisor Schulte. She's finally returned. Always have to spot somebody out, right? Okay, 2021 Resolution 58, authorize a conservation easement on the Washington County Golf Course. Supervisor Dice, Supervisor Smisek. Gotcha on. Okay, we'll begin with County Executive Showman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first of all, I have to give credit to Supervisor Krebs, Committee Chairman Mary, and County Board Chairman Kriefel. This conversation started probably 9 months ago already, but it was prompted by the approval of land use and planning and the county board to sell the 3 acres of Family Park. And the families, or at least the representatives of the families that originally donated the land to build the golf course came forward and contacted Supervisor Krebs, who was kind enough to reach out to myself and the county board chairman, and ultimately led to this conversation today, both resolution 58 and 59 ultimately. So basically what we're asking of you today is to consider placing a conservation easement on the entirety of the golf course, roughly 280 acres out there. That would protect into perpetuity that land. Think of Central Park, New York. Would always be a piece of public land that can be used for public purpose. The caveat to it is there were dollars and cents. If you remember, we were trying to sell a piece of property. So the dollars and cents that go with it are, although these are separate resolutions, they're really connected to one another. So the trade-off for the easement and keeping it public land forever is the creation of an endowment. It's not all that different from what we did with the Washington County Historical Society and the Tower Heritage Center. This would create an endowment, a public-private partnership started by the families, but it's much larger than that as I understand it, and has the potential to be even larger still over years to come, along with the county having matching dollars to create an endowment, at least initially, of roughly $2.5 million, which will happen to coincide with the 25th anniversary of the golf course. So $2.5 million for 25 years. So as I said, these things are separate approvals. They're really autonomous from one another, but they're very much related in the idea for both of them came up together. The endowment itself, as you can read, will help to fund a variety of things related to Washington County parks, trails, and the golf course over time. That's important and relevant to the easement itself because the easement in part is intended to keep that property public purpose and to keep the golf course a golf course for as long as possible. So one thing I want to note is specifically the county dollars. The intent is that those dollars are allowable to help subsidize the golf course and keep it operating as a golf course as long as we possibly can. In the event that the golf industry starts to deteriorate, we could use the county dollars for that purpose. The committee that will help make the decision on how all of the dollars are allocated will also be open to that subsidy. However, the preference for the private dollars is that it goes towards capital type expenditures or acquisitions or things of that nature. So the easement itself would be a registered document in the Registered of Deeds office. It would maintain this property as public property forever, and we're asking that you do that. The caveat on the forever piece is obviously we have structures, buildings, permeable surfaces already out there. There's particularly on the northern part of the property, approximately 20 acres on that side. We are still working through the final details with the family on it, with the families and Ozaki Washington Land Trust, who will be the administrators of the easement itself on what that language will finally look like. But the intent is 20 acres that can be developed for park type purposes, for lack of a better term, with an additional 15 that could be considered in the future and approved through that same committee that will eventually hold the endowment. We're trying our best to draft an MOU that documents the intent of all the parties involved. Again, that intent is to keep this as a public purpose grounds, 280 acres, and generally speaking, open space, just like it is today. With maybe some minor alterations over time and limited to that total of 35 acres, 20 preferably. So a fraction of the 280. So as you contemplate the easement, keep in mind that the transfer from the general fund creating the endowment ultimately is connected, although they are separate approvals. I have been informed with confidence at the last Land Use and Planning Committee that the $750,000 that is referenced in the committee report, which could go up to 1.25 million, is creeping ever so closer to the 1.25 million. And in that regard, it is important that both of these things be approved tonight, if possible. And the reason is everything to do with making those allocations, those dollar allocations before the end of the year. Did I state that correctly? Okay. So it is somewhat timely, and yet at the same time, this is a very permanent decision. So as you contemplate both the conservation easement and the endowment, I'd ask you to consider both of those items. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer those. We have representative from the families here as well. And Jamie Ludovic has been working in the trenches, boots on the ground on much of the agreements, and we can answer those for you.
Thank you. Supervisor Mahalik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To this, I would like to make an amendment and then speak to that amendment if I may, please. The amendment would be the conservation easement at the Washington County Golf Course could be amended on or after the year 2061 by a 2/3 vote of the county board elect. And I'll be happy to hand that language over to the thing. Okay. Okay, I'll bring this to you in just a moment. I've got my notes on the same piece of paper. I want to go on record as being in support of Resolution 58 and 59. I will be voting for both of them. Okay, however, I believe that there is an imperfection, and that is that that imperfection is the fact that we're looking to tie the hands of future generations in order to be able to do what I think is a somewhat misguided extension of the incredible generosity of the families that have gone forward for Washington County and not only provided the golf course, but Family Park. I'm in support of those things. I think they're wonderful things to have. I have enjoyed the Washington County Golf Course myself. I think many visitors will continue. As regards to the hyperbole of the Central Park, please understand this is, we're talking a cornfield surrounded by a county road, more cornfields, okay? With 280 acres versus 843 acres of the most visited urban park in the United States, which is Central Park, surrounded by our largest city, which comes up right to the edge. There's a very big difference. And considering if you really want it to be like Central Park and it being the most visited urban park in the United States, do you really want all those people piling into Family Park? Again, I support it. There is the type of giving that it takes to provide this type of land, I think is superb, and it really reflects extraordinarily well on the families that are stepping forward and doing this. And I want to thank them personally for doing exactly that. But we're also looking at 40 years. Okay, that's 2061. I don't know how many of you plan to be around. I don't think I'm going to make it to 103. Back in 1981, 40 years ago, remember, you're talking no smartphones, no laptops, no social media. In fact, most cars were carbureted back then. You didn't even have fuel injection on most of them. I mean, realize how much has happened in 40 years and how much more will happen 40 years from now. All I want to do, and please understand, in my current mind, in my current belief, I would vote to keep this land pretty much as it is. Excuse me, if it happens to be a golf course, that would be great, or whatever other recreational area. I just want to make sure that we are not shackling the hands of individuals who make up this county board in 2061 with a 2/3 vote of the members elect, not the members present, the members elect. So if there are 21, you'd need 14 county supervisors to vote on any change that they might want to do to the conservation easement. I think it, from my perspective, and understand this is my lens, that it's irresponsible for us to do that type of thing, to lock ourselves into something like this on what, from my perspective, again, is not Central Park. I do believe in the process of moving forward and creating this easement, of setting up, like County Executive Showman mentioned, the fund in order to be able to get the county parks off the tax levy. So many of these things are positive, but again, perpetuity is a very long time. I understand it's been this has been called visionary. And I understand the lens through which one can make that decision, that it's a visionary thing. But please look at it also through the lens that I ask you to look at. And that is that, do you really want to say that for this acreage, where it sits and what it represents, that you want to tie the hands of your children, your grandchildren, and some of you now, even your great-grandchildren, which will be born and be able to vote inside of that 40 years? We don't know what's going to happen. And so please consider the fact that, again, I'm going to vote for both of them, but this amendment is important so we don't lock ourselves into something that I don't think needs to be locked into. It is valuable, it is wonderful, but let's give our future generations, the people who'll be sitting in these chairs 40 years from now, a chance at modifying it if they believe it's necessary for the betterment of the county with a 2/3 vote, which a number of people here today have said, and it's tough to get a 2/3 vote. And they're right, it is, which is why I think that if the people really want to have this remain as it is, it will stay as it is in perpetuity. But let's not perpetuitize, there, I'll use my Bushism, that process right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Marshall to the amendment? Huh? To the amendment? Okay. Supervisor Bishop?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is comments to the amendment. I would not support the amendment. The whole idea of having a conservation easement is to protect the open space for future generations. And we're talking 100, maybe 200 years. Washington County is a desirable place to live. And in those 40 years that Supervisor mentioned, we will most likely have more houses being built. I could see houses all the way around that park, which makes this easement so much more important to protect that land from becoming houses or a business park. Not everyone sees the long term. How can we make the best money? Oh, let's put it back on the tax rolls so that we can make more money for the county. I could see that happening in a number of years. In a number of years, there's chatter that we want to reduce the number of board members. So now that 2/3 vote doesn't take as many people. The whole idea behind a conservation easement is to protect land forever. And so I will not support the amendment.
Thank you. Supervisor Krebs?
Thank you. I would encourage all the other supervisors to not support this amendment. The purpose of a easement is to protect it. It does not tie the hands of the future boards because the language that's being negotiated in the easement does allow the flexibility for different uses in the future, as long as they fall within the spirit of it's public and it's open and it's conserving the open spaces. We can use it for any different recreational or or just passive uses, but at the end of the day, we want to keep the space open. Furthermore, there never was a easement or any protections of this land that was donated to the county. That's why we need this now. This is to guarantee that this board and all future boards respect that donation and we don't get into the situation where we start trying to sell this property off in the future. So with that, I would encourage everyone to please not support the amendment, but support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Mary?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree wholeheartedly with the comments we've heard from Supervisor Bishop and Supervisor Krebs. I too would not support this amendment. I'm glad that the families that originally set this document up 25 years ago didn't decide that in 15 years from now, we were going to have to make up our minds how we were going to change it or they were going to withdraw. I think we do need to set this up in perpetuity. I think it's something that if nothing else, this board can go down with a legacy and someone many years from now can look back and say, man, I'm glad that the county set up a park in the county, right where it is. And we have no idea what kind of shape it will take in 25 years from now or 10 years from now or 30 years from now. But at least it'll be set aside as a public area for all to use and enjoy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Supervisor Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question for Mr. Showman, or somebody might be able to answer this that's close to the negotiations on this. Would this or could this amendment possibly serve as something that would shut down this resolution as say, a poison pill?
Yes.
Having heard that, then my comments would be this. We wanted to sell off a portion of the park, family park, to raise funds for the rest of our park system. That was our original intent. The community around there really were not keen to the idea, to say the least. And we more or less said, put your money where your mouth is. And to me, God bless them, they did. And so that's very impressive. I believe that this project should be forwarded, so I will not support this amendment on the idea that it would probably shut down this whole deal. And I will support the resolution, and I will support the further transfer of funds from the general fund. And I would encourage my fellow supervisors to join me. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further. Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor, I don't know who's first, Supervisor Conrath. Supervisor Conrath.
Yep, thank you. Thank you. I too also would not support the amendment. The family is working with the county in good faith. We need to respect and honor their donation. And they're putting their trust in us. And as others had stated, this needs to go into perpetuity, to help sustain the quality of life that makes Washington County such, a beautiful county. As Josh, as our states, it's, the best county in the state. We really need to sustain our green spaces and the quality of life here.
Thank you. Supervisor Bossert.
Okay, I appreciate Supervisor Mahalik bringing up this concern. Unfortunately, I think it's just a little bit too late in the game at this point. It would mean we would have to negotiate this agreement, which by the look of it is essentially final. Supervisor Kelling brought up a great point. The effect of this would be that it'd be a poison pill on the whole deal. So I could not support it. Maybe in the future for agreements like this, having a time frame 30 or 40 years out where we review things is good. But I just think we're too late in the game to look at that at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, see no further. Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just say in Supervisor Mahalik's defense, he brought this up months ago. It was discussed with the families ad nauseum, and they made very clear that this was not something that they were interested in.
Okay, we'll be voting on the amendment. You have the amendment. Could you read it again?
Be it further resolved that the conservation easement at the Washington County Golf Course could be amended on or after the year 2061 by a 2/3 vote of members elect of the Washington County Board of Supervisors.
Okay, everybody's clear on the amendment. All in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Nay.
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 Okay. Good. What for Ashley, one aye and the rest are nays. You got that? Thank you. Okay. Back to the resolution. Any further discussion on the resolution? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Resolution 2021, Resolution 59. Transfer for general fund, authorize the creation of a golf parks and trails endowment fund. This is a 2/3 vote since it is a fund transfer. Make a motion, Supervisor Gallitz, Supervisor Krebs. Any further discussion? Supervisor Conrad, you have your hand up? Supervisor Conrad, your hand is up. Are you?
No, I'm sorry, I never brought it down before. My
Okay.
apology.
Thank you. No, no problem. Supervisor Markwart.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Executive Showman, what is the significance of the West Bend Community Foundation being involved?
Thank you for that question. Good question. The West Bend Community Foundation is involved because they're the ones that are going to hold the endowment itself. Actually be the Greater Milwaukee Foundation on behalf of the West Bend Community Foundation, where they'll hold the dollars. Basically, our investments will sit with them. Then by the rules of the endowment, they will basically administer. They only will authorize expenditures that fall within the confines of the agreement that we start with at the very beginning, which is where we kind of get into that operational versus capital versus acquisitions. So the language, when I said we were negotiating, that language is what the West Bend Community Foundation vis-a-vis the Greater Milwaukee Foundation will administer based upon.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on page 2, lines 1 through 3. It refers to the county being able to basically borrow part of the initial monies that they put in. And during the time until they repay it, no distributions can be made out of that fund, correct?
That's correct,
how that
yes.
reads. I wonder why we would allow that. A future board could basically hog tie this fund to not be used by dipping into it all the time. I don't see why we would want to make it available to dip into for the general fund.
And that's certainly something, if the board wishes to remove, you certainly can remove. My thought process was, if times were bad enough, there might be some crisis that you need to access principal for a period of time, which also is why there's you need to repay it within 5 years requirement. It's replicating what there are some other endowments that are publicly owned are also doing. So they have that authorization, or that allowance is probably the better word. Whereas at the end, these are still public dollars. And so it gives some flexibility to future boards to be able to use those, and still requires that they replenish. But again, if it's the wishes of the board to not allow for that, I have no problem with that. I would still sign that.
I'll wait and hear what other supervisors have to say on the issue then.
Thank you. Supervisor Gallutz.
Thank you, Chair. To the question about the 20%, I guess I don't have concerns or issues with that. It is limited. There's a payback component. And with our other discussion about a healthy fund balance policy, I just don't really see it popping up. But if there's a strong opinion for it and someone wants to amend, so be it. But I do see this as sealing the commitment that prior board made to having a self-funded park system, essentially. And this just further supports that and lets the community know that this board and future boards, past boards, we're all in agreement. And that's at least how I see it. And it also does provide a revenue source with interest. I believe in the packet, it does speak to, albeit it might be a little with current interest rates, but it is possible that fees or interest could be used for ongoing support for the park system. So I suspect many of you are already thinking that, but that's what comes to my mind is it just further signifies our commitment to the decision to remove the park control system from the tax levy. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's, I gotta give credit to Josh. This is very forward thinking with this little caveat in here with the extra further resolve. Eventually, we know that the economy is not going to keep chugging along the way it's going, right? And in hard times, it's best to have as many tools in the toolbox as possible. Hopefully, you never have to, take money from it, but it's there in case of an emergency type situation. So it's not something that we're going to depend upon, but if it's necessary, it's there. So I'm supportive of it too. So. Okay, any other questions? Supervisor Markwart, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. To Supervisor Bishop's point, I don't see the purpose of having the fund hamstrung if we do dip into it. So I would move that we remove the word "and no withdrawals be distributed from the fund until all corpus is repaid." So line 3 of the second page, just strike everything after 5 years.
I can explain the thought process if you'd like. So the thought process on that specific language, I was trying to address the 20% rule first, but that specific language, the thought process was, and I'll be a little bit cynical, any board that would be willing to raid 20% out of a fund like this probably isn't going to be in a huge hurry to pay it back, even though we put a requirement that really is unenforceable in there to pay it back. Therefore, the interest would basically refill the fund on its own if the board's not willing to pay its own 20% back. That was the thought process. Again, if that's the will of the board, I'll sign that too, but that was the thought.
Supervisor Krebs.
Just looking for clarification on this amendment. It's only by striking only line 3 after 5 years. We're just removing the fact that we're saying we could still raid 20% of the fund, but we're not going to have any penalties as far as we're still going to be able to additionally take distributions out of it. Am I understanding that correct?
Well, it's not my amendment.
Well,
I think that's the practical
if the
effect.
amendment would pass as presented, what's the real impact to a future board or future executive when they read how that would be written?
My interpretation of what's happening is you basically would just have less principal, less interest. Still collect interest.
But we could also still take our whatever the typical distribution and annual distributions would be, we could still pull that interest out too, besides our 20%.
Your 20% would be gone, and therefore it would be produced. So whatever's left would be the only thing that's producing interest, which is going to be a lesser sum than the full 100%. So that's my point.
Excuse me, the people online cannot hear Josh. Maybe he's not speaking into his mic.
Sorry.
I cannot hear, sorry, Executive Shulman.
That's okay. I've been called worse.
Sorry.
I don't know where I got cut off, but the gist of what I said was when the 20% is withdrawn, let's say some future board does that, that 20% is no longer producing interest, and therefore the amount of interest you're getting is only off the remaining 80%. And so the amount of revenue that was celebrated earlier that we'll be collecting is going to be reduced. And I assume it's possible that a future board wouldn't replace that 20%. And if they don't replace that 20%, you're just basically perpetually reducing the amount of interest you can earn.
If a future board would refuse to repay the 20% that they, I'll call raid from this fund or borrow, whatever.
To use a Jim Doyle term, yes.
Who would the West Bend Community Foundation or other interested parties be able to sue the county for that 20% back? I'm trying, how would this actually play out?
That's exactly what I was alluding to. I suppose presumptively somebody could file a suit, but practically speaking, there's no enforcement mechanism. It's the
Honestly,
county board's word that they're not gonna rate it, and if they do rate it, they'll fill it back in.
I personally would feel more comfortable if we would just want to avoid the possibility of future conflict between entities of we just remove the lines 1 through 3, the entire further resolved, and just don't even give the opportunity to claw back or borrow the county's funds that way. I'm just, the more we're talking about it, the more that whole paragraph kind of creates a future setup for conflict of sort. So I guess I won't support the amendment because I'm not even sure if that's going to help or hurt it.
Yeah, we have that motion in a second. Do we get a second on that? Yeah, we got a motion and a second. We really need to.
Who's the second, Don? We didn't get a second yet.
Marcy.
Marcy is? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, we have to consider the amendment first. Okay, I'd rather do one at it.
Yep,
Okay.
I understand
rather-
your
okay.
process. Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment that's presented before we go on? Are they? Supervisor Gauss? Supervisor?
Okay,
Sorry,
thank you.
Oh.
Thank you. You're a gentleman. Thank you.
All right, hold on. All right. You have to push back in Supervisor Dice. Okay, are you not speaking to this, Brian? Supervisor, okay. All right, got you now.
All right, well, thank you. So we got a couple things going, but with the amendment, I would not support it. And for the reason is because with that language in there, it basically penalizes the board for making an action. So there's a consequences to their action. At least that's how I read the no withdrawals may be distributed from the fund unless all corpus is repaid. So yeah, they should be penalized if they're rating from the quote unquote fund and they can't use it as intended until they pay that back. So that if you want protection for that rating, removing that language doesn't protect from the rating.
Correct.
Or at least that's how I understand it.
That's how I understand it. Thank you. Supervisor Marquardt.
Correct me if I'm not understanding this, but the other distributions that could happen or that we're trying to restrict would be for expansion, maintenance and other things at the golf course?
I'm not sure I'm following your question. I'm sorry.
Well, as I understand.
He lost his mind.
Sorry. I think it's the interest. We receive interest from the endowment and
So that interest is the only thing that can be spent?
No, it won't be spent until it's paid back.
Okay.
So you take the 20%.
Well, that's what I'm saying is
Yeah.
that I'm trying to, if the if the interest is being used for expansion, maintenance, operations, so forth of the golf course, we're restricting that from being used while this money is borrowed out of the fund. So they can't do what they really are, you know, intending this for funding. But same entity is making those two decisions is what you're saying, is the county board.
Well, yes, ultimately the county board, but there is a advisory committee that oversees the endowments. So it's, you'll notice it's split into two essentially. The families you can't do any of what we're talking about with what's coming from the private sector. With county dollars, you could, and yes, the interest that otherwise could go towards capital or acquisitions or theoretically operating of the golf course if necessary, wouldn't then be available for those things. It would be replenishing what was just taken in that scenario.
Can I withdraw or change my motion, my amendment,
Can you withdraw?
or vote it down?
No, we have to vote on it. It's been seconded, so.
Okay.
You can withdraw it if the if the board has no objection in withdrawing it, but once you make the motion and it's been seconded, the motion now belongs to the board. It's the board's purview.
We'll go
So,
back around.
do you want to speak to this, Supervisor Dice, or should we go and vote or? Okay, hold on.
Would be ditto what Supervisor Gallet said, because that
Okay.
was my exact
ditto?
thought process as well.
Okay, okay. Got that, ditto? Okay, I'm gonna vote on the amendment to the resolution. Everybody understand what it is? It's striking line 3, page 2, putting a period after within 5 years and striking the rest of that sentence. Everyone's clear on that? Okay, all in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye. All opposed? Nay. Okay, unanimously goes down. Are there any other amendments or discussion? Okay, Supervisor Bishop is in first.
Sorry. I'm gonna go with my initial gut feeling on this. If our county is doing so bad that we need $250,000 out of this fund, then we got more problems than that. I would move to make an amendment to remove from page 2, lines 1, 2, and 3 in their entirety.
Okay, second by Supervisor Krebs. Any further discussion?
No, I was just gonna make.
Okay, all right. Any further discussion on this amendment? Supervisor Conrath? You have your hand up? No? All right, disregard. Okay, on the amendment to eliminate page 2, lines 1, 2, and 3. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have Supervisor Conrath. Anybody else? Supervisor Dice, Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Gonring, Supervisor Vespalic. Motion carries. Huh? Ashley, you get all of them? Ashley, did you get everybody?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to clarify Supervisor Conrath was in support of this amendment, striking out the lines 1 through 3.
Oh, you were in support?
Correct.
Okay, sorry about that. So
It's okay.
there's a little bit of a delay, I guess. I must have asked for the opposed a little too soon. Okay. All right.
It's
got
all
that,
good.
Ashley?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, back to the resolution at hand, 2021 Resolution 59. Any further discussion on the resolution as amended? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 2021 Resolution 60, County Aided Bridge Replacement, Town of Farmington. Need a motion, Supervisor Hartwig, Supervisor Gondring. Supervisor Newman. Do you want to make a statement? Oops, sorry.
Nothing to say except I'll abstain from this one.
Okay, being Town Chair of Farmington, he's going to abstain. Supervisor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a clarification. The numbers here are kind of wonky because we would pay half of 20% or 10%. And the final replacement cost, do I understand, Doug? It's somewhere between 1.25 and 2.5 million, but probably closer to 1.25. There's something about the state bidding process, and I think Scott can speak to that.
Okay,
So our number will be closer to 125,000 than 250 in the end, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's correct. It's going to be hopefully significantly less. When the towns apply for the state bridge aid, they're applying back in 2018 and using 2018 numbers. It's now 2022 when they're going to be bidding this out. So they went and did their due diligence before they came here and got new estimates for what the bridge is actually going to cost. We looked at those estimates. We actually just opened up our County Highway H bridge, which is not too far away from here and similar in size, and use that as kind of a comparison. And we believe the town's numbers are truly good numbers that they're giving us. The amount that you provide to the town will truly be dependent on what their final construction costs are going to be. So even if they are less, they've received left, because what will happen is the state will run that project for them, provide invoices to the town. We'll split those invoices up, 50% to the town, 50% to county. So if there are funds left over, they just stay in that county road and bridge aid fund. We don't write them a check at the beginning of the project. We actually get reimbursed throughout the project. So they also have committed to that if the project does go over those initial cost estimates, to apply for change management. That's the state's process, that if the funds are, if the project goes over the original estimated funds, you can apply for the state for additional funds. And right now the states have some funds available in those bridge projects, especially with the new federal infrastructure package coming through. So we're hopeful that the town will do that, and the overall project will be less.
Having said that, this is pass-through money, so I urge everyone to vote for it.
thank you. Okay, seeing no further discussion, we'll vote on this. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Are any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Resolution or 2021 Resolution 62 grant application. I'm sorry, I skipped one. 2020 Resolution 61 transfer from the general fund, Washington County Snowmobile Club Association. Supervisor Showden, Supervisor Krebs. Supervisor Mary. Let me click down here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The evening's getting long. We'll just keep this as brief as we can. Each year, the county acts as a pass-through agent for grants from the DNR to supplement funding for the snowmobile clubs in the county. This year, there was a supplemental offering came out, but we dropped the ball. We didn't get the application done in time such that we could not get some of these funds. In the meantime, the snowmobile clubs, assuming that we were going to fulfill on our end of the deal, went ahead and made some obligations in the range of $53,000, somewhere in that range. So what we're trying to do is just make them good by passing through and getting these funds to the clubs. I was not able to attend the October 28th Land Use and Planning meeting, but Vice Chair Gallitz managed the program that day, and I'll let him follow up with some of the crossouts you see here on the proposal. Supervisor Gallitz.
Thank you, Supervisor Mary. So what we tried to do is bring some relief to the snowmobile club. And what I mean by that is we're still trying to understand how much, while it is a pass-through, as Supervisor Mary indicated, We don't know if that grant is going to be issued at 100% or 90 or 80, although Snowmobile Club tends to believe that it will be at 100%. So to protect the interest of taxpayers, we felt a reasonable solution to bring some more immediate relief would be the 50% transference. And then once we understand what the DNR would have, I guess, issued to other snowmobile clubs in other counties, we would then release the balance.
Thank you. Supervisor Conring.
Yes, I guess main part of me talking here is to make sure that something's in place from now on. So when a person is not at work, that their desk is taken care of. In other words, these grants or whatever they're working on is still being worked on. This was a mistake made by the manager, I would have to say, that nobody took this person's place in writing these grants. When this person left, there was only a couple days left to have this grant in, and he was gone from work. So somebody should have been taking that place. And I was told by the Snowmobile Club, and this is, I guess I have a question then for Mr. Gall, it's up to 55,000. I was told it was at 47,000. And I used to do a lot with snowmobile clubs for many, many years. And yes, we normally got 100% of whatever we were going for. So I mean, that's not a big deal, but the major part is here that whoever's writing these grants, if they're not going to be there, somebody's got to make sure that that desk is taken care of. I mean, I think somebody's head should go for 50.
Chair,
Supervisor
if you'd like me to respond to, excuse me, Supervisor's comment, the amount by the snowmobile, let me rephrase that. Snowmobile Club has had an obligation, correct me if I'm wrong, and they submitted detailed expenses of what that grant amount was. That's something that they did and they submitted, and I believe it was submitted to the DNR. So the committee has faith that the amount is accurate and correct.
Thank you. County Executive.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the record, when this came forward, it was brought to my attention. The reason that it came to the Land Use and Planning Committee after conversation with the County Board Chairman and Land Use and Planning Chair was this is obviously not the fault of the Snowmobile Club. So we're asking you to do something we don't normally do, and right or wrong, there was a mistake made. We have human beings that work for the county. So that has been addressed, and hopefully it won't happen again. I'm sure some mistake somewhere down the road is going to happen, and we'll own it and make it right. And that's what we're trying to do today. So thank you.
Thank you. See no further questions. We'll vote on this. Oops, sorry. Supervisor Sorcy.
Just a question.
Yeah.
Could we take that money out of the department's budget? Or apparently there's nothing left, right? Instead of, I come out of the general fund, it's a tax thing, the way I see it. But I mean, if we take it out of the department's budget, would that work? Or we
I
couldn't do
mean,
that?
theoretically, it could work. It's a it's a left pocket, right pocket.
All right.
It does. It's really up to the board.
Okay.
It doesn't matter.
All right. Seeing no further questions, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 2021 Resolution 62, grant application for county conservation aids. Motion. Supervisor Schulteis. Any questions? Getting late. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed? Motion passes. That was an aye. I got you. I was a little quick again. 2021 Resolution 64 Grant Application Neighborhood Investment Fund Grant. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we already did that one anyhow. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. 2021. You got me on that one. 2021 Resolution 63 Grant Application for Aquatic Invasive Species Prevention and Control. Supervisor Mahalik, Supervisor Pollock. Any questions? County Executive Showman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make clear what is happening this coming year with the Aquatic Invasive Species Program. I know this is of interest of a number of supervisors and constituents of yours. We are continuing our partnership with Waukesha County, despite the fact that the DNR is administering this grant significantly differently than it has in the past. In other words, we're getting a lot less money in state grants than we have historically for this program. And yet we're going to, the budget that you just approved continues the same level of service, meaning we're putting more taxpayer dollars towards it. We did look at other alternatives. I know some of the supervisors here today were part of the discussion and dialogue and got phone calls and other things. But we decided and worked hard in this budget process to make sure that we were able to maintain the existing level of service, even though it's going to cost a few more dollars. So I just want to make you aware of that because I know it was a detail deep inside the budget that you might not have caught.
Okay. No further questions. We'll all vote. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next meeting date, Wednesday, December 8th, 2021. We did 64. We did that. We went ahead. We did that. That was the first one we did. No, we just did aquatic species. 64 we did early with Julie to get Julie. Huh? Do it again? It was so much fun the first time. Okay. Yeah. We only spent an hour and a half on that one. Okay. We are hereby adjourned. Thank you. Make sure I got everything here. Yeah, I can. Oh, this doesn't count.